Alright, so in the last video, I showed you guys every single paramotor that I own. I have a bunch of Mavericks, a Scout, the Fly Products, Tandem Trike, and it kind of prompted the question of why have I been flying the Maverick more often than the Scout? What are the differences between the two? And even outside of that video, in the past few months, I've been getting more and more questions, even though I started flying the Maverick more often probably like a year and a half ago. So I figured in this video, I will finally address the truth of why I switched primarily from flying the Scout to the Maverick. It's just gonna be a discussion topic type video. We're gonna go up and fly. I wanna talk about the objective differences between the two paramotors. And then at the very end of this, I'll tell you guys the real reason why I personally switched. As far as weather goes tonight, it's a lovely 51 degrees right now. So I'm trying to take full advantage of this weather. However, it's kind of windy, but it's still gonna be good. We also have some cool cloud formations going on, so I'm hoping we get like a nice sunset. In case you're wondering, the gear I'm flying today is the lovely Mav Max, and my calf really hurts. F***ed it up trying to push start my motorcycle. The lovely Factory R that I've been raving all about, and the lovely 14-meter Freeride 2 I've been raving about. So that's what we're flying today. Let's get in the sky.
All right, as I expected, conditions are a little bit bumpy today, but we're gonna fly into the wind as we do and then return back with the wind. First off, to preface this Scout versus Maverick comparison, I always say there's no perfect paramotor, there's only a perfect paramotor for each specific person. So this in no means implies that one paramotor is better than the other. They're both like top of the line, really good high-level paramotors. There's nothing wrong with either of them. And the other thing I want to say is a lot of people want to assume that my preference is like determined by monetary reasons, and that's definitely not the case. To be kind of open about it, both companies have helped me a lot, but pretty much in equal ways. Unfortunately, I don't get like commissions or anything off of sales. I can't even really be a dealer for their products. So switching from one brand to another has no effect on me financially. Look at this man just picking up the trash in his Kubota. First topic is durability. And this is a pretty big difference between the two because the Scout is primarily made of carbon fiber, the subframe is aluminum, and the Maverick, on the other hand, is primarily titanium. Now, the big difference between those two. The Scout, with it being carbon fiber, if it takes an impact, it's very likely to shatter. The thing with carbon fiber, though, is you can get a pretty cheap repair kit that has like carbon fiber cloth and epoxy, and you can repair stuff pretty cheap. I've done it before. It's not that hard, although you can repair it, it's never going to look the same. And that's where there's a big difference with the Maverick being titanium. Titanium is a lot more malleable, so on a little bump, you might bend it a little bit, and then you can easily bend it back. Bigger wrecks, I've seen people mangle titanium frames, and you kind of have to make a jig, and you can eventually get it straight again, and it's resistant to bending a bunch of times without snapping. Let's talk comfort, and this is assuming the Scout with the new improved harness. The newest harness on the Scout is a lot more comfortable than the old one. That harness has a tendency to scoop you into the seat. It has a much bigger seat board, so there's more room for your legs. The only gripe I would say about comfort is that there's not as much back padding. So on longer flights, I tend to have like a little bit of lower back pain. It distributes the weight really well, but it does have like a 10-degree thrust angle. So on takeoff and landing, you actually kind of have to lean back a little bit farther than normal. Oh my God, look at all those turkeys. That's a shitload of turkeys. I've never seen that many in one spot. So the Scout, you have to lean back a little bit more, like for your takeoffs and landings. Whereas the Maverick, on the ground, you can stand up perfectly straight and the seatboard kind of folds under you a bit better. In the air, I prefer the comfort of the Maverick harness. Let's talk about weight shift. This is another, I would say, significant difference between the two. The way the Scout weight shift feels is very locked in. as you're doing wingovers and stuff, it feels like when you load up more G's, it really gets locked in even more. And the weight shift feels like when you roll your body, it doesn't move a lot, but it does give you a good response. The Maverick, on the other hand, is much more fluid. It feels more like sitting on an exercise ball where it's like unstable, and especially when you start loading up G's, it feels like it's more roll happy when you do this sort of movement. It also has really good input when you roll into it. I would say a little bit better than the Scout in terms of the weight shift output. Let's talk torque. This is a big one as well, because the Scout is very unique, and it's kind of the signature paramotor that uses aerodynamic torque compensation. That's the fins, where the geometry of the paramotor and the swing arms and the thrust line are all neutral, and the only way it compensates for torque is aerodynamically. So what that's supposed to do is at full power all the way down to idle, it compensates for the torque gradually. The way the Maverick does it is just with these offsets where your riser gets clipped into your swing arm. Now, the thing is with the Scout, it's not perfect. It is really good, but I do find that at cruise, and especially at full power, it wants to pull a little bit to the right. The Maverick, on the other hand, the torque compensation isn't quite as good, but it's damn near just as good considering it has no aerodynamic torque compensation to it. The Maverick will pull a little bit harder at full throttle, and at idle it'll actually pull the opposite direction to the left. And this is one of the big things that kept me from ever switching, but once I switched, I realized that it wasn't that big of a deal. I'm going to combine these two topics, weight and price. The Scout is just a little bit more expensive and a little bit more heavy. To me, it's a very minor difference that doesn't really make a difference in my decision between the two, but it is slightly more in each category. Let's talk reserve mounting, and this is a big significant difference. The Scout is intended with an underseat reserve pack job. What that means is it's pretty much out of sight. It has the handle mounted in a good position by your leg, but inevitably the reserve adds a little bit of bulk under your seat, which when you do a foot drag or takeoff and landing, or just standing up and walking around with the paramotor, you do feel that little bit of bulk. For me, I didn't like that, and I went with a front mount reserve, but then you kind of have to adapt your own system, and it's not a very clean system. The Maverick, on the other hand, it comes intended with a side mount reserve. Personally, in my opinion, out of underseat, front mount, or side, I prefer the side the best. It's right by your dominant hand, so the handle's very easily accessible. In the air, you forget about it. You don't have it on your lap, so it's not flopping around on launch and landing. And it makes you actually feel more free in the air to not have something sitting on your lap, kind of obstructing your weight shift. Now for the real reason. This is the more opinionated part of why I switched from one to the other. And it's because I sold my soul. It's all for money. I lied in the beginning. They paid me a shitload of money to switch. Obviously, I'm kidding. The factors that made the biggest difference for me, when I started flying the Maverick more, I started to like the way it weight shifted better than the Scout. And that's one thing I really always loved about the Scout was the handling. And I was kind of surprised when I started getting more used to and in tune with the Maverick that I started to prefer the handling more. And I'll say that the new harness on the Scout, I actually don't prefer as much because I feel like it reduced the handling and there was less weight shift and more stability in that harness. Another big factor is durability. And for me, the durability wasn't so much like tripping and falling and breaking stuff, because, not to sound cocky, but I rarely ever have issues with that, but more so the durability of transport and just being able to load it into my truck or throw it in the toy hauler and not have to really be gentle with it. The Scout, at least without the new beef tubes, I always kind of felt like you had to set it down gently, and if it tipped over, it might crack something. Maverick, you can kind of manhandle and it's going to be fine. And I started to appreciate that a lot more. There's a couple more factors. The reserve became a big deal to me. I never liked the underseat and I never liked the front mount. It always flopped around. It was another thing that's just kind of in your lap. And the way that this reserve mounts is just so clean. And I'm in like the skydiving, base jumping, rigging type world. And this setup just makes more sense to me. Oh, let's do this as we glove up. The last factor that kind of was a turning point for me, when I had my Scout and I was kind of looking for more power and I put the factory R on my Scout. The Scout was limited to the 130 centimeter prop, or 135 if you stretch it, and that really limited the factory R. And there was just a weird thing about the factory R motor with a 130 centimeter prop 3-blade, because I believe they're trying to compensate. The engine is essentially designed for 140 and they're compensating with more pitch. So that configuration, that motor and that propeller on my Scout was kind of weird. I didn't really like the way it accelerated, and I kind of honestly preferred flying the standard Moster with the 130 3-blade over the factory R with the 130 3-blade, which is crazy. Even though the factory R had a little bit more power, the whole personality of the motor, I liked the standard one better. Alright, killing my motor. And now that I have this Mav Max with the 140 and the factory R, I can say that my suspicions and feelings of the factory R with the 130 were kind of accurate. I can tell that this 140 on the factory R really makes the motor shine. Obviously this is a Mav Max and not a standard Maverick, but the fact of me putting the factory R on my Scout was kind of one of the reasons I started not flying it so much, and what opened me up to the Maverick more.
Just packed up on that last landing. I did the same thing, went up and swooped, trimmed out, and I mean, I've never done this before. It's not like it's that significant, but I foot drug the hanger on a swoop motor off, which like, I feel like this Freeride 14, that's one of those things that like, it's now enabling you to do things you didn't think you could do before. I hope you guys enjoyed my comparison, and I hope that answers some questions of why I've been flying the Maverick more than the Scout. Check out Risky Biscuits Co. for our merch, ozone gliders, harnesses, reserves, and E-props propellers. And pretty soon we're going to be doing a giveaway with another paramotor. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed. Appreciate your guys' support. Till the next one, have fun, fly safe. Peace.